Hello. Welcome to this edition of the Love and Come Alive podcast. I'm Oscar Crawford. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is how to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. It is a term you may have already become familiar with, but I want to build on it today so that we can have an understanding of what people are experiencing who are living with and suffering with PTSD. Now, last week we dealt with how to effectively manage our unresolved anger, and while anger is a troublesome issue, anger is nothing like post-traumatic stress disorder, where our unresolved anger can cause us to act out on people that had nothing to do with whatever offended us originally, or it can cause us to flavor all of our relationships and activity with feelings that we haven't resolved because of something that happened to us earlier. PTSD is radically different, exponentially different, in as much as whatever the event was that traumatized a person happens to them inside their mind over and over again. Now, the people we hear the most conversation about in the public marketplace, the public domain, are the persons who have been to war. And persons have been going to war since there have been people, and when survivors come home from war, the war may not literally be over for them. Many people go through challenges in their relationships when their warriors come home because their warriors are still battling a war when they have really come back to what should be their normal life, but it is everything but normal. I'm literally sitting in the dark as I make this podcast to you because I literally want to feel the experience of the darkness that is caused by this disorder, because it is a dark place for the people who are seriously affected by it. And you may have some PTSD for some events in your own life. If at any point you feel like you're replaying an earlier incident in your life and you're freaking out, you're scared to death, you're really responding and reacting as if it's literally taking place right now, yes, you may very well be affected by PTSD. But I want to talk a bit more about military personnel who come home from war as survivors or injured warriors. What happens is whatever those events were that led up to their traumatic events, when they get home and the war is over, those events can be triggered by sounds or smells or behavior or their observations and other things going on around them. Anything can throw them back into that living hell. So whatever they have survived, they are right back in that war zone, they're right back in that battle, they're right back in that fight. And so they're struggling to survive in that moment because it is very real to them. Now, if you're a person that has never had to experience anything like this, I am really, really thankful for you, because no one deserves to have to live like this. And I'm going to say to you quickly that too many people are having to live with this every day. So imagine being a woman who has stayed behind while her husband or lover has gone off to the war, and she can't wait till his time is up in the war zone where he can come home and they can get back to loving and living like they used to together, to find that the person that came home is not the person that left. This person is always on edge. They can't eat. They can't sleep. The slightest little noise sends them back into the war. And people who are living around them almost become scared for their very lives because they do not know how that person is going to react from one moment to the next. I'll share one experience of dealing with a person who was a victim of PTSD from some traumatic events that happened to him in a war. I was with a couple of friends one night at a pool room, and there was a person there that was shooting pool that nobody would shoot pool with. And so he was asking for people to play him, and I could find no reason why I shouldn't play him, but the friends that I was with said, man, please don't play him, because if anything goes wrong, he may think he's back in the war and try to kill you. Okay, well, there are times that my being assertive may not be the best judgment, but I was glad I chose to play pool with the guy. As we were playing and I was winning, My friends kept looking over at him and said, man, please do not beat this guy. He needs to win. Everybody needs for him to be okay because nobody feels really safe whenever he's around because they've seen him go off before. When it was my opportunity to win the game, I chose to win. And when I sunk the last ball of our game that gave me the victory, I really did see in his eyes him go through a change. And the only thing that I always know that when something or someone wants to intimidate me with the presence of fear that they want to project onto me, the thing that I must never do is react. When someone is in a real cranked up fear thing that they're trying to put over on you, reacting means you've already surrendered to whatever's going on. So I maintained my composure. I didn't break eye contact with him. And a few moments later, he thanked me for being a real person with him and not letting him win because everybody's afraid of him. And yes, he had been through some things. And I learned some of the things that he had been through. But in that moment, in that night, I made a buddy for that moment. Never saw that person again. But in that moment, it wasn't about pride that I walked away from that. But it was about a meaningful moment for another person who needed to feel cared about in a place where nobody cared about him but kind of tolerated him because nobody knew what he might do from one moment to the next. And so many people live with persons like that. When warriors come home from the war, their families live very scared and frightened of them because they don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. And many women have gone through domestic violence as a result of their wounded warrior coming home and still going through moments as if the war is still happening around them. Now, I want you to try and imagine this for a moment. And I'm not suggesting that everybody I'm talking to has been in the military or been to a war, but imagine you have survived the literal war. You've survived the war. And you're home. You're sitting down trying to eat dinner with your family, and you hear a noise. Maybe you hear a car backfire as it's passing your house. It puts you right back in mind of the situation that you were in, and it throws you back in it as if it's really going on. And people who observe you are observing your posture as if you're in a real fighting circumstance. That would scare most of us. All right, so I would like to encourage you. I'm not saying to go out and engage people who you know have PTSD to see if you can't befriend them or get to know them, because unless you're really familiar with persons affected by this disorder, you really should allow them to be in their own space. Be courteous, be kind, but don't be intrusive. Don't try to prompt anything so you can be really kind to them and loving to them. Just be who you are, allow them to be who they are, and just enjoy some limited relationship with them that's built upon respect. Now, I'm really talking about situations in war that you may have gotten the picture that mostly affects men. That's not true anymore. Women come home from the war affected by the same kinds of things. But women also come home from war from another kind of traumatic event, throwing them into post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And this is called friendly fire. Friendly fire in the context that I'm going to describe to you, I want it to turn your stomach because this is real. Many women who have gone to the theaters of war have been discharged from the military because they were victims of rape and or gang rape by their comrades, and when it became public or became an issue, they were the ones to be discharged. And so now they haven't only gone to a war and been affected by the literal war, but they've also been affected by the men who terrorized them, used them, and raped them, and they have that to live with because they haven't been treated well on the other side of those events. So what happens to a woman who has been through a rape event, whether it's military or whether it's civilian? If a woman has been raped, there are emotional triggers that can take place around her, and it can throw her back into that event, and it will be as if it's happening all over again. And I'm going to say to men, as you date women, get to know the women that you're involved with, because you don't know what the particular woman you're involved with at the moment has been through. You need to know. You need to know to protect her from her own thoughts and conditions when she feels like she's been triggered into an event, and you need to know for yourself. Now, there are other things that I could tell you like that, but this happens every day. And we are around people affected by post-traumatic stress disorder every day. And I'm going to draw a few other scenarios. And I'm really sad to say that there's nothing fun or redemptive about having gone through an experience that has led to PTSD. Now, it is not only the military and war that causes PTSD. Let's say that you have been in a horrific car accident or a motor vehicle accident, and you've been hospitalized maybe for months. Now, how excited do you believe you will be to get into a car the next time? Or do you think that every time you get in a car for a while, you will be probably thrown back into the incident that you've already experienced? Now, what I'm hoping you're understanding is that PTSD is premised upon experiencing circumstances that are literally not taking place in the time they're being perceived. The events have already taken place, but people experiencing them experience them as if they're happening in real time. This is tragic, it's traumatic, it's emotionally draining, and really can suck the life out of many people. And I regret to have to inform you of this, but many people suffering PTSD have taken the ultimate step and committed suicide because they just don't see any other way around. Now, I will offer some thoughts on treatment and recovery toward the end of this podcast, but there are other things that you really need to be aware of. What happens if you were a child who was bullied in school? Just because the bullying stops as you get older, it doesn't tell your mind to quit playing back the memory of it. So as you get older, anytime you feel like you're in a moment that's familiar to the moments that you were bullied, you feel like you get thrown right back into that. And so you have that experience all over. You may be an adult on a job, but something happens and you feel like the situation is going to be a bullying moment like you experienced earlier in your life. And so it starts all over again for you. Now, I don't know how many of you have been through something like that. Now, literally, things don't have to have been physically violent to precipitate the experience of post-traumatic stress disorder. What happens to people who have survived natural disasters? What about people who have been through tornadoes, hurricanes, and earthquakes where they have been, and I use this term only for the sake of what I'm sharing now, feel like they have been scared to death. Now, they didn't die, but they felt like they were scared to death. The house started to rock and roll and shake from an earthquake, or the roof or something began to blow off of the house, and it just seemed like death was imminent. And yet, they didn't die, but they survived an experience that keeps playing over and over in their mind as if it's never going to stop, they're never going to be free of it. And until there's some significant and serious intervention into the lives of people who have these experiences, things really, really do not change. Now here again, I really want you to take time to pause and consider your own life to determine whether or not you may not recognize that you're being affected by things that have already happened in the past, but they're affecting you in the present. Our thoughts, if we don't learn how to dictate the flow of our thoughts can dictate to us what they want us to feel. And it is because we have this gifted tool inside our cranial space, inside our head, inside our skull. Our brain is so sophisticated that, like computers in the 21st century, our brain is able to take trends of thought and put it together to say, oh, I see these trends in thought, maybe you want to watch out for that. And the way the brain does these trends, it's the same way that people do what's called profiling in law enforcement, right? So a law enforcement officer, and I'm using the worst case scenario, a law enforcement officer sees a man of color driving a premium car in a neighborhood where that person would not be thought of to be living. And so he stopped and asked his business, why are you here? Whose car is this? All of these kinds of events can be traumatic. So when you hear conversation about Black and Latino men having concerns when the police car light comes on behind them, those have become traumatic events because of the reasons for which they have been stopped. And when it got down to it, it was no reason at all. They had just literally been profiled. Now, I want you to know that even as much as we are spiritually civilized, profiling is what our brains do on autopilot. Now, I want to give you an example. If you ever came to a training workshop that I was presenting, and everybody had gathered, if it was 5 people, if it was 25 people, if it was more than 100 people, if it was 1,000 people, I would ask this question. And I promise you, if you were there and I asked this question and you've never experienced it before, you'd be looking at me like, what is wrong with that guy? So when I open up a training workshop, I ask people to look around at the audience, see the people around you, and I want you to identify the person you like least because of the way they look. And everybody looks back at me and says, what do you mean? I said, no, I haven't asked you to point the individual out. I've asked you to identify the person that you like least because of the way they look. And the persons just start yelling out, oh, I can't do that. That's wrong. I would never do anything like that. And I quickly assert that your brain did it for you without your permission, and it has already scanned the room, decided who you like and who you don't like based on trends of thinking over your lifetime. And I promise you that is true. You have walked into settings where you've seen somebody and realized that you didn't like them, didn't want to get close to them. You don't know them, you've never met them, but on the basis of the way your brain has processed information of the experience over your lifetime, you don't like the way they look. Well, let that shake you. It's standard. It happens to all of us. What we have the capacity to do is because we are intelligent, we have the capacity to override trends of thought that come up in our mind to say, we don't like that person. Because now, if you were in the same kind of an event with me all the way to the end, whether it's 1 hour all day, however length of time it is, I would ask you at the conclusion of the event, remember how I asked you to identify the person you like least? Think about them for a moment. And I want to know over the course of the training period, have you changed your mind? 99 times out of 100, people say, I got to know the person. And what my brain was prompting me to consider from the beginning was really not valid. It was valid to the brain because it was providing you information on which to make a decision. But you, being an intelligent person, were able to override those prompts to make decisions for yourself. But you were wise. You took time. You got to learn a situation and a person, and you decided whether what your original feeling was about them was really accurate or whether or not it was really true. We have these gifted tools inside our head that try to protect us. That's the reason the brain profiles. The brain profiles everything. I mean, we're trying to develop sophisticated computers to do that now, and you can tell that every time you go online, anything you've ever bought in the last 30 days, 60 days, you're getting a ton of those things on the pages as you open them up because somebody collected that information on you, and so now you're going to get a ton of it because people have now profiled you. Oh, Oscar bought that last Tuesday about 5 o'clock, so let's show him the same kind of things he bought last Tuesday at 5 o'clock, this Tuesday at 5 o'clock, and let's see if he makes the same move. And so people try to predict all of our behavior. We want to predict our behavior, but we want to predict it in such a way as it brings out more positive outcomes than we might achieve if we did not have the information. And so people with PTSD, who are suffering the experience of PTSD, their brains have done the same thing, but they have had exponentially deeper, wider, broader impact. And so these things, when they continue to play over and over, it is as if they are really, really happening in their now, and they are in distress. And not only are they in distress, but the people around them have to go along for the ride. They become in distress too. I hope you're getting the picture. PTSD is significantly more challenging than our unresolved anger, because we're being influenced by our unresolved anger. In PTSD, we're literally having the experience over and over and over again. Now, I want to make this personal just for a moment. When I describe events, I want to give you things that are real, because if things aren't personal, they aren't real. So when I was 14, 15 years old, my family, we farmed growing up. And one day we were working in a hayfield, and we are on a tractor, my father, my brother, and I. And so my little brother, he might have been 10, 12 years old. I might have been 13, 14. We were going down a hill on a gravel road, and my brother looks up at Dad and says, look, the tractor's going faster and faster, and I can't get it to slow down. And so Dad says to him, okay, see if you can safely go around. But when he tried to go around, we went up a bank. And as we went up the bank, the tractor flipped in the air. We're upside down, turning over in the midair. And all I knew is that people die from tractor accidents when they turn over. And so literally, as we're having this experience, it's in this action that you see on television and movies, where things are happening very slow. You're cognizantly aware of what's going on, but you know the outcome is not going to be good. It's like we're having a different click, 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 as the movie is continuing to go very slow. And as it continued to go, when the tractor came down, it was sliding down the road, and I knew that my father and I were alive. We might have had some bruises and scratches, but we were alive. I fell on my father. I was on the right back, or the left back fender. He was on the right one. And when we flipped, I came down on him. Now, I broke a few ribs when I fell into him with my knee. And when we stood up, realized we were alive, the only thing we knew is we could not hear my brother. We didn't see him. All we could see is the tractor over in a ditch, upside down. Now, what I'm about to tell you is literally the truth. If I wasn't living my life, I would not believe it sometimes. We called out his name. He says, hey, I'm fine. Could you get it off me? My father literally went to the front of the tractor with his hands, picked it up, and flipped it back over on its wheels. My brother got up. We all hugged each other, touched each other to make sure we were okay. And after we talked for a moment, believe it or not, we decided that since we weren't significantly hurt, we would go back to the field and continue to finish our day's work. Now, when we got home later that day and told our mother the story, she fainted in the floor. And I get that. But do you think that when I touch a tractor that I don't remember that event? Or an accident when I was 16 in a car. I was riding with my baseball coach, who happened to be drunk, and I don't even want to remember all that happened that night on the way home, that I didn't get home. But I was 3 months before I got home. I was in hospitals having reconstructive surgeries and losing my college basketball scholarship. But when I got out of the hospital and started riding in cars again, I was scared to death, because every time we go around a curve, I was back in that accident. Every time the car would go over 40, 50 miles an hour, I was scared because I was reliving that event. It took a while. It took a while for the influence of those events in my life to become under control. And I got to be honest with you, I have worked with my mind all my life. I do not want my mind controlling me. I want my mind to be my asset. Now, I've said to you I would share with you a few things that are available to persons who are suffering with PTSD that is help. This, what I'm about to share with you, must be facilitated by a professional. Professionals in controlled settings can lead people back into their experience so that they can feel it, even if it feels very real to them. What the professionals want the person affected to realize is that while they may be feeling they're experiencing, having the experience in the moment, that moment is not real. The events have already taken place, and nothing is harming them but their thoughts or their reliving of the experience. Now, that takes time. That's a controlled therapy. It's called desensitization, because they want to help the person become desensitized to the event so it no longer dictates how they respond and feel, and can have more control over their life. Second to that, people want to meet in groups. I'm saying people want. Medical professionals want to get people with this common experience in groups, so that they can talk to each other and share with each other how they are surviving those events. Now, that's as challenging for people who are, when I'm thinking of themselves as manly or adult or strong, and they don't want anybody to know they've been through anything. That can be very challenging because now they're going to open up and be vulnerable with people they may or may not know, but with the high hope that they're going to share and learn information that will help them deal with their experience in a more effective way. One-to-one therapy is not the therapy of choice, but can prove to be effective in some cases. And in some cases, the last resort is to provide medication that helps people to maintain a sense of calm when these events take place. Nobody wants to take people to medication, but in extreme circumstances, if medication is the only thing that is going to help the person control their behaviors in these situations, then medication is absolutely appropriate. The goal of PTSD, like unresolved anger, is to resolve the situation. Unresolved anger can be dealt with much simpler than PTSD because PTSD is much more real. What happened that prompted anger is not reoccurring. It is just the memory of it that lingers, that was never processed, that influences behavior in the present. PTSD is literally having the experience over and over and over again and not being able to control it. So we want to help people get help. Now, please, 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 do not make the mistake of trying to help someone with these situations and you don't have any skills. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and I still will not just jump in with both feet when I don't understand the parameters or the prompts that cause people to experience what they experience when they are dealing with PTSD. I don't have answers for that situation. I'm one of those people who's really big on presence and care and regard for and training people to think through situations as being an asset. But people with PTSD are a little further in than that. One-to-one is not always the best case scenario. A whole lot of different things need to happen for a person to resolve their PTSD, and it really takes time. And you got to understand this. This is not another one of those things you can say to people, hey, can't you just get over it? No, that is not happening. I said to you earlier that I am sitting in the dark. I'm literally sitting in the dark as I am making this podcast to share with you. And I'm sharing it with you in the context of the idea of loving and come alive. For those of you who've been through some form of heartbreak, disappointment, where love didn't go exactly as you wanted to, yeah, you might have been intimidated for a minute, but you dusted your feelings off and decided your interest in love and connection and relationship was more important than living scared for a lifetime. The idea of loving and coming alive is to be able to feel alive again with excitement and enthusiasm, to be able to feel good about who one is, knowing that we contribute to life and knowing that we touch people in ways that make them feel better about who they are, but that love really has an opportunity to be practically applied in one's life, that relationship becomes meaningful and personal life becomes more meaningful. There's nothing sadder than a person who's given up on life. So we're encouraging people to do their very best to love again and come alive. All right, so I've got about a minute to spend with you now. I want to express to you how much I appreciate those of you who are listening to the podcast and who are sharing your feelings and comments with me and encouraging me in the work. What is going on here is literally I'm working on developing the notion of what love is so that can be shared in a text later on in the year. And I'm working with people to organize a mastermind group, and we're organizing a retreat that is taking place in the mountains of Arizona in October, but totally invested in defining love for people, helping people understand what love is and how to do love in a practical way that is the most meaningful and beneficial to the people involved and the people who suffered some injury, some setback, some emotional development that's just been halted or stopped. I want to say to you, don't give up. There's life after the experience of perceived failure. There's life after the perception of experienced failure, and you can love and come alive again. Thank you for listening. This was the Love and Come Alive podcast. I'm Oscar Crawford. Until next time.